In the year 70 AD, Roman legions sacked and burned Jerusalem. Israel would remain a nation in exile for nearly 2,000 years. But in the aftermath of World War II, the people of the book returned home. Israel's rebirth and survival in the 20th century has often been called a miracle. Those who were there cite their own experiences as proof. I'm Michael Greenspan. I'm an investigative journalist. These are their stories.
So many times my life was saved miraculously.
It was a real miracle.
If I was religious, I would definitely say this is a miracle.
I am sure it was a miracle.
It was a miracle for me to survive.
And that was a miracle. A real miracle.
This is a miracle. This is the miracle that I'm talking to you.
It's really like a miracle.
It's a big miracle.
I don't believe these things just happen.
If not miracles, this land wouldn't be in Jewish hands today.
To live in Israel without believing in miracle, you are not practical.
This is the place of miracles. This is the country of miracles.
It seems that in a way miracles here are part of life, really.
Modern Israel is more than just a Jewish state reborn. It's a kaleidoscope of people and lifestyles from every walk of life. A mosaic of human energies joined together to build the first democracy in the Middle East. But I'm not here to extol Israel's achievements. I'm on assignment in Israel for my network to investigate the incredible stories of supposed miracles that people claim have happened either to them or to someone they know. Part of my research is to find out what the typical Israeli thinks about the whole idea of miracles.
Do you believe in miracles or not, and why?
I don't know, miracles.
I like to believe that good things can happen. Sometimes I believe in miracles, and not lately.
I believe in miracles.
No. Yes, I believe in a miracle, because I believe in God. I don't believe in things I can't see.
I haven't seen any proof of it.
Just the mere fact that the country exists against all odds, there's some kind of a miracle in there.
I believe that what needs to happen, happen.
I believe in miracles because happened to me many times.
I don't believe in miracles. I think there's a reason that things happen.
I'm living in Israel. It's a very big miracle. No more place for miracles. It's a place for talking.
Like we believe in God, we have to believe in miracles.
There are miracles all the time. Sometimes you don't see them, sometimes you see them.
Well, I accept the fact that there are things that we don't understand.
Against all odds. It's self-explanatory, really.
I believe in myself.
I believe in God, so I think that it goes together sometimes.
Everything is a miracle, but we don't want to see it. I mean, we take everything for granted.
I don't believe in miracles so much because it doesn't happen to me.
I believe that God is involved.
Ilan Nahum is a leading Israeli cinematographer and the director of photography for Against All Odds.
I was between the high school and the army time. And I was working with my uncle in the old city, organizing tourist groups. There was a promenade there, and usually there were youngsters, you know, sitting around, eating, chatting. And there was always a lot of trash among the bush. And one day, while passing, I decided that I needed to see what was in a certain paper, brown paper bag that looked just like the rest of them. I was like attracted to this specific bag, though there was nothing attractive about it. And I went straight to this bag, looked inside, and I saw a wristwatch, 2 wires, and it was all wrapped in a cotton. Immediately, I knew it was a bomb.
So you did a very logical thing.
Yes, but there was no logic. I was passing there every day. Nothing was special about this day, nothing. The police robot was called, you know, they shot it. It was a bomb, it was. Later I found out it was like half a pound or a pound of TNT.
Enough to do some damage.
Enough to hurt some people, yeah. If I was religious, I would definitely say this is a miracle.
Journalists, like people in most professions, I think, feel most comfortable talking to other journalists. We just understand each other on some unspoken level. Yaakov Eilon is the lead news anchor for Channel 10 television in Tel Aviv. He's popular with viewers because he's known to be straightforward and fair in his reporting. I wanted a fellow journalist's view of this idea of miracles. I came here talking to people and exploring the land and a little bit of its history in order to try to understand what this country's all about.
I think it's a generational thing. If you're coming from the diaspora, you know, from a country where Jews have been living as a minority, like in the United States, you'll find in the Israeli-born generation here a different mentality. They would be much more inclined and similar to European and American. They would be independent, very curious about what's going on around the world, imitating what's going on around the world in many aspects. And it's different, naturally different from what you remember probably as growing up in the States.
Is there Judaism in Israel's soul?
Yeah, but Israel is not religious as a whole, especially not the younger generation. Being an Israeli is, first of all, being a soldier in the Israeli army, and that defines a lot in the Israeli society.
What do you think of those people who say this or that thing was a miracle? The person who tells me that he was in a war and passed in the heat of battle within 30 meters of Syrian troops, and for some reason he could see them, but they didn't see him. Or the person who tells a story from another war where the figure of Abraham evidently appeared and frightened attacking Arab forces away. When you hear stories like that, what's your instant reaction? Are these people nuts?
No, we have miracle stories every day on the news. People, you know, who walk down the street and the bus was exploding and they just saved themselves. And people walking here and doing this and doing that and just missing terrible things. It seems that in a way miracles here are part of life, really.
Israel itself is a miracle. It really does defy all odds. You can't walk the streets of the old city in Jerusalem, or gaze at the skyline of Tel Aviv, or drink coffee at a sidewalk cafe on Dizengoff Street near the sea, and not be in awe of what's been achieved here. Despite its small size, Israel is a world leader in cutting-edge technologies in all sorts of industries, in the arts and sciences and humanities. Up at the Technion in Haifa, they're actually leading the way toward a cure for cancer. 2 Technion scientists just won the Nobel Prize. Why here? Why are there so many more accounts of miracles in Israel than anywhere else? If there is anyone with a perspective on miracles in Israel, it would be Rabbi Israel Lau, former chief rabbi of Israel and now chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. Rabbi Lau is one of the most respected religious leaders in Israel. He agreed to meet me at his home in Tel Aviv. I've been looking at this country and talking to people and asking myself day after day, is what I see here just the result of amazing human courage, foresight, and wisdom? Or is it the work of God? Is it a miracle?
I think it's a combination of both. First of all, if they wouldn't be dreamers, they wouldn't be fighters. If there wouldn't be a promise from the Almighty to our ancient fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we wouldn't dream 2,000 years to come back home we wouldn't fight for it, we wouldn't be ready to sacrifice so many sacrificings, to come back and with a feeling that the prophecy of Jeremiah, chapter 31, Veshavu vanim ligvulam, the children will return back to their homes, be fulfilled in our very eyes. Miracle starts with the very existence and survival of the Jewish people so long, and in spite of all the battles, all the sufferings, including Holocaust.
How about the modern state of Israel? Is that also just a matter of deciding that we want to preserve these ideals and beliefs, or is it just courage and wisdom, and maybe it's just going into battle knowing how to fight better than the enemy knows? That's not a miracle.
If not miracles, this land wouldn't be in Jewish hands today. The Jewish state wouldn't be declared and wouldn't survive so far. I do believe that the Almighty gave the wisdom and the power to a leader like David Ben-Gurion to stand on May 15, 1948, in Tel Aviv, Rothschild Boulevard 16, to declare the very existence of the Jewish state. All our friends in the United States of America, like President Harry Truman and Minister Marshall and the others, said to us, don't dare to declare the state. The 7 countries of the Arab state will destroy you in one day.
2 weeks before the Declaration of Independence, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Sharet, go to the States to meet the Secretary of State, General Marshall.
Historian Aryeh Yitzhaki has studied the turbulent years that gave birth to the modern nation of Israel. We met on the campus of Bar Ilan University near Tel Aviv.
General Marshall told him, Mr. Sharet, if you declare about the Jewish state, this is a suicide, a real suicide, because the Arabs' army attack you. There is 5 or 4 armies, modern armies, well trained by British and French, with a lot of modern weapons, and your army is nothing. It's only a militia. The Haganah is a militia with ancient weapons from the time of the Turks. You have no chance at all.
Marshall was a military man. He probably
knew what he was talking about. Of course, a general, and he know the facts. Mr. Sharet told him, I must tell your opinion to my boss, David Ben-Gurion. And Ben-Gurion said to him, Marshall is right, and you are also right. The facts is facts. But I believe there is something that Marshall didn't thought about it. It's the spirit. It came from the heart of the Jewish people, from the ancient times of the Maccabees and Bar Kokhba and Joshua and David, and we have it also now.
I look around and I see people here who look American, European, they look Western, the girls wear short skirts, the guys have their hair slicked back with gel. They don't look like people who are copying any role models from the Bible.
Yes, but inside they have the spirit.
Many believe that the miracle of Israel's 20th century rebirth and survival is the fulfillment of biblical prophecies spoken thousands of years ago. There is convincing evidence. Consider this incredible fact. 2,000 years ago, the prophet Daniel received a vision that Jerusalem would be delivered from its enemies in 1,335 years. The prophet Haggai later added that the day of blessing would come on the 24th day of the 9th month of the Hebrew calendar. The date foretold by these 2 prophets was December 9th, 1917, the very day the mayor of Jerusalem handed over the keys of the city to the British Army. Historian Yehuda Noblach put it this way.
God makes history, makes the future too.
I'm meeting someone today who has a lot of perspective on this issue. Clarence Wagner is an American author and lecturer living in Israel who has written several books and thoroughly examined modern Israel in the light of biblical prophecy. We met in one of the historic Christian churches in the heart of Old Jerusalem.
I've been traveling around for a few days now and talking to people, trying to understand finally what it is that makes this country tick, because I came here with some preconceptions about feeling the influence of the Almighty here, and I keep being confronted by people who tell me that what I see is the result of human endeavor, courage, maybe luck.
Well, I'd like to see it as a partnership. There's so many passages from the Bible, so many scriptures that I feel come alive in the land of Israel that ordinary people are performing. And I know they don't wake up and say, I'm going to fulfill Bible prophecy today. They're just doing what comes natural. But it's not possible that God's divine hand and divine plan is a part of making this all happen.
Well, I'm going to become like the Israelis I've been speaking to and say, prove it. Show me some examples of biblical prophecies that you see having come true here in modern Israel.
Well, my favorite passage is Ezekiel 36. This is a passage that's quite a long chapter where Ezekiel is looking at the land. He's in a way speaking for God, and God is lamenting over the barrenness of the land. He says, as the enemies came in and put up their gods in high places, that the land became deforested and absolutely a barren desert. And then it goes on, and he says, as he's speaking to the ground, that God has a favor upon this, and the Jewish people are going to come back to the land of Israel. And when they do, they will restore the ancient places, the ancient terraces. In fact, the cattle will walk on the hill, the ancient cities will be rebuilt, and that Israel will be, in fact, far more prosperous at any time in its history. He goes on then to say that God had scattered them to the nations, and then says that he would bring them back, and he would change a heart of stone to a heart of flesh and put a spirit upon the land again. And once it's restored, the people in the land, that the nations round about would look and say, look, it's like a Garden of Eden, where it was rubble, where it was destroyed. Now look at it, how it looks today.
But how do you explain the fact that this tiny little country, surrounded by countries with much larger populations, managed to come into being at all and managed to remain in existence despite all the warfare?
Well, that's true. Isaiah 66 says, can you imagine such a fantastic thing, that a nation could become a nation in a day, that a people would become a people, and Zion would be restored. You see these images, Jeremiah 31, where he says, you know, God who put the sun in the heavens and put the stars and the moon in the sky at night, the God who makes the waves roll, this God has made a covenant and a promise with the people of Israel that they will never be destroyed. And we see the continuity of Jewish people throughout history, even though at all odds. And it's my belief that God has preserved the Jewish people as a nation, and had intended, because he made a promise with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would give them this land as an everlasting possession, and he confirmed it over and over again. But I see other passages. For example, Isaiah 35:1 says, the wilderness and the solitary place would be glad for them, the desert will blossom as a rose. And then the psalm says, the dews of Mount Hermon will water the hills of Judah. You know, this could be very poetic, or it could be very accurate. What we do see today, for example, is that the dew of Mount Hermon actually does flow into the Sea of Galilee, which then goes in the national water carrier and waters what? The hills of Judah. The Negev desert is a place of fruits and vegetables. One fact most people don't know is every day Israel exports 5 million fresh flower blossoms to flower markets around the world. In fact, the tulips on the tables in the Arab Gulf states that they get from Amsterdam are all grown in Jewish farms in the Negev. All right, so the Bible says the desert would bloom, the water of Mount Hermon. Is it coincidence? Is it actual? Is it poetry? Is it real? But more than this, we see other passages. Isaiah 43:5 and 6. He says, I will bring your children from the east and the west. Very nice. He says, but I'll say to the north, give them up, and the south hold not back. And we stop and think of the last 130 years of history, and we find that Jews did come from the east and the west, but they were held as captives under communism in Russia, and then under Marxism down in Ethiopia. And as he spoke, I'll say to the north, give them up, and the south hold not back, we find in 1991, when Gorbachev began to allow the Jews to leave, they came literally in tens of thousands a month, over 1 million in the past 10 or 12 years. And this was done as he gave them up. The south says, hold not back. The government there said the Jews could leave from Ethiopia. When they got to the airport in Addis Ababa, there they were told they couldn't leave. They said, we'll wait for permission, and they waited for well over 1 year. And then one day, almost 15,000 were airlifted into Israel, and this was an amazing miracle. But what did God say? Give them up, hold not back. What happened? They gave them up and held not back. Prophets are writing and saying that, for example, Jeremiah 16, he says, the day is coming when my people who say, remember the Lord who brought you up out of the land of Egypt, they'll be saying, remember your Lord who brought you up by countless numbers from the land of the north. Hey, when these prophets wrote this, there were no Jews in the land of the north. There were no Jews captive in the south and in the north. The desert was not, and the land was not barren as it was when the Jews came in at the turn of the last century. These things, I believe, are actually in line with all of these various prophecies, and there are just too many of them to be coincidental.
How do you figure out, what kind of sense do you make out of this dichotomy between the religious and the very non-religious or secular aspects of this country? It defies my understanding.
Well, I think you'll find what you're looking for, and that's the unique thing about Israel. And I'm going to flip the coin around, where I always hear people say, well, it's a secular state. Yeah, well, it has its elements, but when I compare it to other places I've been in the world, they realize the national calendar, of course, is the Jewish calendar. The national holidays are biblical holidays. You'll see scripture verses on every rock in every park.
The place names get to me.
The place names, which are right out of the Bible, and that's what's so much fun. You know, the ancient cities being restored, and here they are. And you find that the rhythm of the country is a biblical rhythm. And I think you can find just about anything you want in Israel, but I think we have to ask the question, what is Jewish? Is it just religion? Or is it tradition? Or is it community, family, food, ethnos, all these things put together? And I think you can find the richness, like a prism, you know, of all these wonderful things that are expressed by being Jewish.
Be my guide for a second. Tell me, where do I look to find the heart and soul and the truth of this country?
Don't watch television, and come here and walk the streets. Go down to the cafes, sit and talk to people, catch the housewife hanging her laundry out, and just go knock on her door, just ask her who she is, how she feels. Talk to the immigrants, talk to the Ethiopians, talk to the Russians, talk to the Palestinians. Hear the heart of the people, because it's an incredible collection of unique and different people who make this crazy place work. And it's not a monolithic group at all. And when you get to the heart of it, you know, Israelis are often called sabras. That's a cactus fruit, prickly pears, we say in America. Prickly on the outside and sweet on the inside. And it's true. It is so true. If you can just get through that rough and tough exterior, which everyone needs just to survive every day here, there's a heart of gold. And if you ever make an Israeli friend, they're your friend for life. It's so true.
You only left one person off the list of people I have to talk to, and that's you.
Oh, thank you.
Clarence, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's Shabbat, the Jewish Sabbath. As early as 3 o'clock or so on a Friday afternoon, everything starts winding down all over Israel, since religious Jews must reach home before sundown. Despite all the trappings of a modern, secular country, underneath it all is a biblical rhythm, a seemingly inescapable connection between the modern present and the biblical past. Is this a place of miracles? From one end of this country to the other, one cannot escape reminders that this is where David fought Goliath, where the walls of Jericho fell, where the sun once stood still so Joshua could finish a battle, where Jesus walked on water, raised Lazarus from the dead, and fed the 5,000. True miracle. But is modern Israel itself a real miracle? I can't escape the fact that no nation driven from its homeland has ever returned. No other group of people has endured relentless persecution at the hand of every major superpower in history and survived, from the Persians to the Romans, the Greeks, the British, who 300 years ago tried to drive the Jews from their shores, the Russians with their pogroms, and ultimately the Germans and their final solution that murdered 6 million Jews. And yet, miraculously, the Jewish people, seemingly tethered to the ancient prophecies of their rebirth and renewal, did survive. The nation of Israel was reborn in a day, as the prophet said it would be. The barren wasteland was renewed, and the people did prosper, just like the prophets foretold. In the heart of Old Tel Aviv is a nondescript building that once housed the Tel Aviv Art Museum. Inside is a plain room, quiet but for the occasional visiting tourists or a group of school children on a field trip. It hardly seems like a place for miracles, Yet it was in this room that on May 14th, 1948, David Ben-Gurion stood and declared the rebirth of Israel in the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. A nation reborn in a day, just as the prophets had foretold would happen. That this day, ending 2,000 years of Jewish exile from the land of the Bible, ever happened was a miracle. And every day that Israel continues to survive and prosper since that day, despite all the odds against it, is a miracle too.